as well as flashing and transition membranes. So when I was in your office a handful of years ago, transition membranes were not part of the discussion. This is a new and exciting application for some of these products and the products on the market. So if you're not working on anything with masonry, this will still be relevant for you. And we're talking about transitions between roof to wall, air barrier to air barrier, glow grade. So some really cool applications that I'll finish up the presentation today with those to give you some food for thought in the transition world. And then as we're going through, we'll talk about compatibility between cavity wall components. You want your flashing to play nicely with everything else that's in the building envelope. What's really great about some of the products that are out there, flexible stainless steel is compatible with everything. So if you're, a lot of times air barriers get switched out, or if you're doing projects that are in different areas of the country and you're not really sure what's going to get used, it makes it really easy and kind of takes that pinch point away, knowing that these products are compatible with whatever building envelope system you're going to be using. Some of you may be familiar with Dr. Joe Stiebrick. He's from the Building Science Corporation. The picture on the screen, yeah, I know it's a little bit of a dramatic looking water destructive photo. However, it's not uncommon for this to happen. You see the efflorescence under the wall or under the window there. Dr. Joe says we have to make sure that we are layering our materials so water can get down, out, and away from a building. So think about that raindrop. We're following that raindrop through our wall, making sure it can get out and away. The most elegant expression of this concept is flashing. We didn't pay him to, we're the flashing people. We didn't pay him to say this. Flashings are the most underrated building enclosure component and arguably the most important. So you might be thinking, yes, would love to use a copper or flexible stainless steel flashing. Well, I'm here to tell you that there are products out there that will last the life of the wall, that are compatible and not just made by us. All of our specifications are non-proprietary, and all of the products I talk about today we make and other people make. So I'm not just trying to downplay what my competitors have. It doesn't matter what type of project you are working on, whether it's mixed use, the multifamily work that's pretty popular. I know you all have done some big projects in this realm. You have to control for water. This is a really unfortunate situation. I know we're not in Charleston. We're not too terribly far from it. But you go through this. They had over 40 condo and apartment buildings involved in lawsuits. When litigation gets involved, this is when it gets really scary. So we're here to help you in any way that we can when it comes to flashings. We want you to choose the right product for your project. There's a lot going on in our wall systems today. This is a detail from the IMI, which we have a nice location over in Bowie. They do some great trainings there. But this detail, it starts to show that there's a lot going on, and our wall systems are pretty complex. In order for things to come together, we have these protection layers. Things have to be compatible. And it's really hard to make things continuous when they're not compatible. So obviously we're here to talk about the flashings and the transitions. There's no manufacturer or product in each, listed on the screen. These are just the generic terms. So you throw in a manufacturer, the year it was made, this list grows exponentially. Speaking of compatibility, it means different things to different people. What you're seeing on the screen is a chart from the Air Barrier Association. This is looking at chemical compatibility, making sure that two materials, when they come in contact, they don't dissolve each other or cause another one not to perform as intended. We want to make sure that our products are playing nicely. This is a really good start, this chart, but we encourage you, use your reps, lean on your manufacturers, have them write letters of compatibility between neighboring systems. We do this every day. We order materials and samples from other, from Tremco and the Carlisles of the world, and they're constantly testing products. But this is really important to make sure that this chemical soup, we know about it and we know what's going on. Another way of looking at compatibility is adhesive compatibility. And this is pretty much what it sounds like, making sure that if you're calling out for two products to stick together, that they actually can stick. And the contractors out in the field, this is the one that they, when they call up and they're like, hey, I'm using a self-adhering flashing, is it compatible with the exterior gypsum board, blah, blah, XYZ. Well, what they're asking is like, is it going to stick? So we want to make sure that our products can stick together. We always recommend considering your adhesive compatibility in both ways. And what I mean by that is what you originally thought was going to go on top of one product may be switched. And weather, trades, material delays, that's the norm these days. So you might end up having to flop those products around. Consider, if it's a peel-on stick, what is the adhesive on it and what's the facer? Because you might have to end up calling on a product to stick on top of it when originally you had intended it to stick to something else. And I know that's kind of a long-winded discussion on adhesive compatibility, but you do want to make sure that you're considering the facer and the adhesive on your self-adhering products. When it comes to flashings and through-wall flashings, this is what's out there. We firmly believe there are no bad flashings. We just want to make sure we're giving them a chance to perform in our projects, in our walls, the way that we want them to. So as I'm going through these materials, you'll be able to make your own evaluations about, what product you would want to use and what's right for different projects. To put it simply, flashings are a water shedding device. We like to say catch and release. So yes, you have flashings in your wall. We don't just want them to catch the water. We want them to be able to drain the water. We don't want it sitting in our cavities. So the almighty little L at the bottom of the drawing, well, yes, that's flashing. That's what we're talking about down here. But we have all these other areas that we want to make sure we're putting in flashing as well. And the detail, I want to shout out our friends at the IMI. That is their detail on the right-hand side. It's a good starting point, the basics. So these are, believe it or not, our most frequently asked questions that we get from people when they're reviewing their details or they're deciding what type of flashing to specify. We get these questions. One, how far, or flashings need to come through the wall. The question that comes up is they don't want to use a drip edge. They don't like, their client doesn't like the way that it looks. So here's the deal. If you have a flashing that is UV sensitive, you have to hold it back from the leading edge of your wall. But your through-wall flashing needs to come through the wall. So when you have a flashing that has to be held back, when they're UV sensitive, you have to put them on a drip edge. If you have a flashing that is UV stable, then yes, you can bring it flush. But at the end of the day, you want the flashing, you want your flashing system to make it through the wall. It's in its name, it's through wall flashing. Number two, people will ask how far up the backer wall to detail your flashing. Our minimum right there is 8 inches. That's just the minimum. You can certainly go higher. You want to seal your flashings down. Don't lay them down dry. That's just, if you have a drip edge, seal your flashing to the drip edge and seal your drip edge down. We're just trying to prevent any wind-driven rain, water getting into and under and between those components. And then last but not least, use a termination bar. This is best practices, belts and suspenders. We get this question when someone is specifying or installing a peel-on stick. And they'll say, well, it's a sticky flashing. It sticks to the wall. Do I need to use a termination bar? Yes. Mechanically fasten your flashing at the top edge with a term bar. It doesn't have to be metal. You don't want to use aluminum, but they do have plastic. That's really inexpensive. That's a very cost-effective option to use. Use that termination bar to mechanically fasten it, and then you want to come back and you want to put that bead of sealant between your termination bar and whatever's on your back of the wall. A lot of times your air barrier is already installed on there. If there is ever an option to shingle your air barrier over top of your flashing, that's the best case. Because when you attach something on the face, like flashing is, it's technically a reverse lap. So if you could bring your air barrier over it, you would want to do that. I know it's not always possible. Hopefully you're still with me here. I have a couple more introductory slides to kind of think about as we're going through the materials. A flashing checklist. This is a really, it's meant to be like just a, in layman terms, what do I want to be thinking about when I'm choosing flashing? Number one, water impervious. Obviously, you're not using a napkin as through wall flashing. We're going to build a little bit on this. Number two, resistant to damage during construction. This is all about making sure your flashing survives installation. Remember, this is a moisture shedding device. So if your flashing has a hole in it, it is a failed system. So what does this mean? The more durable your flashing can be, puncture, tear, UV resistance, the better chance we're giving it to survive construction and survive that process of it sitting out on the job site for weeks or even months. Things are falling on it, other trades are stepping on it, the sun is starting to compromise it. Let's give it the best chance we can and not negotiate the integrity of it before we even put it in the wall. Number three, this is easy. You don't want your flashing staining your building. Flashing should not make your building ugly. Rubberized asphalt flashings that have asphalt, and then you attach them to a drip edge, they can melt, and they can stain the outside of your wall. You want your flashing to be compatible with everything it comes in contact with. You also want, and this is kind of like obvious, but if you're using as a product, as a transition membrane, you also want it to be compatible with adjoining materials. Number five brings us to the life expectancy of the flashing should match the life of the building. If you're building something with masonry, chances are it's going to be there at least 20 years. Most people I talk to, masonry buildings, we're talking 50 to 100 years. You don't want to choose flashing that is just the cheapest product out there, because replacing flashing is extremely expensive. It's a labor-intensive process. We say, so in the Maryland, D.C., Virginia area, about $300 to $400 a lineal foot. That's at ground level. So imagine, where your office is now, buildings that are 10, 5, 10, 15 stories high. To replace flashing, you're putting scaffolding up, but you're tearing away the wall. You're taking everything out. You're putting everything back, the insulation, reintegrating it with the air barrier. It's a very labor-intensive process. It's expensive. A good flashing order to, in your area, Cheney Flashings or East Coast Industrial or Glengarry, it's like $5,000 for flashing. And when we see those come through, we're like, oh yeah, nice. $5,000 bucks. That's it. In the big scheme of things, reskinning your building and replacing flashing, you're talking hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, in addition to any litigation and water issues on the inside. So now that I've hopefully not scared you too much on that, and the goal of all that is to make you understand that flashing is important. It's extremely important. And there are good products. There's better products. And the way we install them and design them, it matters. It truly does. Rubberized asphalt. Here's our good friend, 40 mils thick. It's a peel and stick. It's well known in the industry. Pretty much every manufacturer has a version of this. A lot of them are made by the same people. They just slap a different label on it. 40 mils thick. The dollar bill that just came on the screen, that puts into perspective this spacer. Typically, they are 4 to 8 mils thick. A dollar bill is 5 mils. And what that means is this spacer, this polyethylene, which is pretty much like saran wrap, that is the workhorse on the product because that's providing all the puncture, the tear, and resistance. Let's take a look at installations, kind of what not to do here. Gaps. This is a really big point with rubberized asphalt flashings. They cannot span a gap greater than 1/4 of an inch. 1/4 of an inch is not very big. So if you have a pen or pencil on your desk or your table, wherever you're working, I mean, we're talking like a fraction of the width of that. Not a lot. Make sure you're supporting these flashings in your details. Our airspaces are 1 inch, 2 inch. I mean, they're getting pretty wide these days. So we want to make sure we're supporting the flashing. How do you do it? Well, you can take this drip edge that's typically 3 inches and now bring it all the way back into your wall and up your horizontal. So when your flashing is coming down and sitting on top of this, it's going to be supported by this rigid piece of metal. The problem is, well, we were going to use peel and stick rubberized asphalt because we thought it was inexpensive. But now we're supporting it with this rigid piece of metal everywhere. It's no longer an inexpensive system. And at the end of the day, let's say you do that, you're still only getting a 0 to 5 year warranty. When it comes to any type of flashing system, you want to look at it as a system. And what I mean by that is, you know, you can go into, if Genco Masonry in Bethesda goes to Glengarry and they say, I need a roll of rubberized asphalt flashing, what's the quote? Got a project coming up, it's a condo building, I'm going to need 6,000 lineal feet. Well, they have to consider not just the cost of that flashing, but primer, termination bar, drip edges, any special sealants that they need to use with the system, and its support across the air spaces. So when you look at it as a whole, it's no longer an inexpensive system. It's not a bad flashing by any means, but there are limitations that make you have to use some additional accessories like primer. That adds 25, 35 cents a lineal foot to the system. Termination bar, we always recommend those no matter what. I do want to draw your attention to this bottom photo. This is a school. It's actually out in the Midwest. It went through litigation. What happened here is they used rubberized asphalt and they stopped it short from the leading edge. Guess what? The manufacturer literature said hold the flashing back 3/4 of an inch. Well, they did that, but they didn't do the second part. It needs to be put on top of a drip edge. So they missed it by, less than an inch there, and lots of issues going on. That story and photo was shared by a consultant out in the Midwest. To that point, flashings that are UV sensitive need to be extended with a drip edge. Unfortunately, you can have our good friend Asphalt Drool here. This is your rubberized asphalt flashing. It's melted out. This is in Minnesota, so doesn't have to be Orlando that we're talking about where it's super hot. It looks unfortunate. I mean, yeah, we can go back and cut that off. If it's higher up on the building, it's going to cause stains, especially if we have a light color veneer. But what's really scary is now the majority of your flashing is on the outside of the wall. Self-adhering flashings. I don't know if you all do mock-ups. We highly recommend them. We're happy to help you out, visit them, send out materials free of charge to the contractors. It really is the best time and place to get this right. Something to look for. They're installing self-adhering products. Make sure they're rolling it. And I know it sounds silly to be enforcing this so much, but if it's not rolled, it's not applied per manufacturer's installation guidelines. Absolute must. And you can see on that little detail how we want the adhesive to really bite into the substrate. Speaking of continuing that thought on mock-ups, this is one that was sent to us by an architect. That's not even our product. And this has nothing to do with the product or the brand. But the way we install it and design it matters here. What they didn't do is they didn't address this at the bottom of the wall. You can see how it's mortar, dirt, the flashing warmed up. It's just an asphalt and plastic. So it warms up and it droops and it softens, and now we have this sagging. In addition to that, make sure your lats are sealed and rolled. And judging by the fish mouths, these bubbles in the back, I'm going to go with the fact that I don't think that was rolled. At the end of the day, what's more detrimental about the performance of this? Well, we're catching water, and now water can't get out of the wall. Spray foam. I'm not sure if you all have entertained the idea of using this on any of your projects. We have a few reps throughout the country that represent BASF, the spray foam line there. Pretty cool product. Just a note of caution. If you have spray foam and you're using it in your cavity as continuous insulation, make sure that your flashing that you're using is able to withstand the heat from the spray foam when it cures. And when it cures, it creates an exothermic reaction. It gets up to 300 degrees. Well, if that's hitting a plastic or an asphalt or a rubber, you can guess what happens there. And what happens is exactly in the middle here, a hole that has been melted, burned to the flashing. Moving on to copper flashings. Believe it or not, and it's this year has just been, you never know what to expect when you go into work every day this year. Believe it or not, I'm going to tell you that copper is at an all-time high, and it has been one of the largest selling years of copper flashing. So I thought eventually I would be talking to people about how copper is kind of phasing out because there's less expensive options. It's just not the case right now. What I'll tell you is that if you have a client or a project where you want to use copper flashing, it's a wonderful flashing. I mean, we just made a huge jump in performance from rubberized asphalt to copper. We also made a big jump in price. But now you're getting a life of the wall flashing, much more durable. If you have a client that wants to use it, make sure you're specifying the non-asphaltic copper flashing. Just to put it to you bluntly here, you can't get asphalt coated copper flashing anymore. Everyone has gone away from it because it's not compatible with air barriers. So just do yourself a favor. If you have copper going in, take out the asphalt description and go with, there's only a couple manufacturers still that have this, and it's the non-asphaltic version. Just because this is a semi-local project, this is out in Frederick, Maryland, so not too far from you all. It's a school going up. It might be finished at this point. This is a few months old. It's an addition going up. So I'll give you a solution and something to entertain. If you have a project that wants to use, or that you want to use, a long-term flashing, life of the wall, compatible with everything, UV resistant, that's still affordable, this is your landing point. And there are several manufacturers out there, a handful of them that have it. Flexible stainless steel. Yep, it's actually metal. It's not like a potato chip bag. It's a real sheet of 304 stainless steel. It's 2 mils so that it can be folded and holds its shape. See here at the wall how it's like in this shape of an L? When your stainless steel gets thicker than 2 mils, it's very difficult to fold. It wants to fight you. It has that memory. So you have 2 mils that can be easily folded and worked with. At 2 mils, over 2,500 PSI puncture resistance. That might not mean very much to you, but I want to put it in perspective. The rubberized asphalt that we have is 120 PSI. So going back to that point of giving the flashing the best chance to survive installation, this is going to do it. You don't have the drooping, melting, staining going on. You have a bare stainless steel face that everything sticks to. Life of the wall, fire resistant, UV resistant, the price point. So the price point is actually closer to rubberized asphalt for a roll, but you start to eliminate some of the additional accessories that are needed, like primer or full cavity support. So you have a product that's, 70, maybe not that much, 50% less expensive than copper, closer to rubberized asphalt, yet actually outperforms copper flashing in every performance category. Oops. And just to give you a visual here, comparing copper and stainless steel, people will ask, well, why would anyone ever even use copper anymore? A lot of projects still do, a lot of government work, a lot of institutional work, just because that has been their spec for 70 years. But the flexible stainless steel is really starting to cause people to think. And then those who have been specifying any PDM or rubberized asphalt, it's like, well, shoot, I'm getting now a life of the wall product that's metal, that's compatible with everything, that's about the same price. And this graph actually shows the copper, the price of copper. And you can see this is kind of when I just drew that line there. That's when COVID started, and you can see it's going on the up. I was just looking this morning. When COVID started, the price of it was $2.18. And I think yesterday it was at $4.40. It had more than doubled, which is pretty wild. Not only do we have flexible stainless steel, and by we, I mean the industry as well, we have self-adhering. So for all the people that love their self-adhering peel and stick flashings, here it is. It's like the thing that you've always been waiting for. It's stainless steel, it's flexible, it's compatible, and it has a butyl adhesive. With that butyl adhesive on the back, you don't need a primer. That saves in material and labor costs. Also, I want to point this out, and I hate that I have to. You want the stainless steel to be bare and exposed. There are manufacturers that put a plastic or a polymer fabric on the face of the stainless steel. There's no reason to do that. Now we're covering up the benefit of fire resistance, UV resistance, compatibility. So we want that bare stainless steel to be exposed. The side that goes facing down is going to have your butyl or a little layer of fabric, like a cross-woven polymer fabric that gives it a little body, or your peel and stick version is going to have butyl. That goes down, and your bare stainless steel faces the world. And last but not least, when it comes to the flexible flashings, there's a line of materials called active drainage flashings. So if you have a masonry project, stone, thin brick, eaves, stucco, you know, sometimes our apartment, condo, mixed-use buildings will have like a little bit of everything around that, you know, the ground floor. This is a really cool line of flashings to use. Very versatile. It comes in all different cost points. You can go with copper, you can go with stainless steel, you can go with peel and stick stainless steel, or a butyl, just a standard membrane. How the product comes is there's a fuzzy felt-like drainage fabric on the face. This is what brings in that active component. Anywhere water hits your flashing now is actively whipped and drained out of the wall. So rather than having just your little weep holes every 18 to 24 inches where the water is, you know, supposed to drain, we have continuous drainage around the entire base of our building. Continuous weep. You don't need additional mortar netting, which is a big cost saving. And you have all different types of membranes to fit your budget, whatever type of membrane you want to go with. That's a good installation photo. I think that one's up in the Boston area. And then this one, this is an apartment project. This one's out in Denver. This one is in Wilmington. This is just a new concert venue that they were putting up. Let's say you really like the idea of the peel and stick stainless steel. You really like the idea of the drainage. Well, you can have them both. The best of both worlds here. You're installing it like a peel and stick, but you get that active drainage. If you remember early on, I did that cheesy phrase, catch and release. Well, this is the one that actively helps in releasing the moisture from the wall. It is available in 316. I don't even know if I mentioned it, but typically everyone goes with type 304 stainless steel. Just know that type 316 is available. in all of the products that are stainless and all of your accessories that are stainless steel. This is what you would want to use if you have a really chemical, harsh environment, you're close to the ocean. It just stands up a little bit better in those corrosive areas. Something else. Of course there's something else. Not quite done yet, although I am coming down the home stretch here. DFARS. This kind of sounds like a mouthful. Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. You're probably thinking, if you're writing an email, kind of paying attention, you're like, wait, what did she just say? All this is, it's something that you include in your specification if you're using stainless steel to make sure that the stainless steel meets USA standards. This is a photo, real life project. This drip edge is rusting. That's really unfortunate because that project wasn't even done being built yet. They either use stainless from another country or aluminum, or that's not right. What's really bad about that is they had to take out the course above it to fix this. Just added labor, time, money, material costs. By adding DFARS into your spec, it's just a way of adding a little quality control so that this doesn't happen. And I'd be more than happy to send you information on what this is, how to specify it, what it looks like, etc. Last but not least, when it comes to flashings, we have a rigid sheet metal. This is copper. This is stainless steel. You're not folding this by hand. It's labor intensive because you're soldering and welding the seams. Here's what happens. It's going to be quite frank with this. People will spec it. It's in their spec, but then they'll list an option under it, a flexible flashing. If you list another option that's flexible, no contractor's ever going to use this. You're not going to get this in your specs or in your project. So the flexible copper and flexible stainless steel, you still get the longevity, and the contractors don't fight you because you're not having to bend this on a brake and solder and weld it. So it's installed like a flexible flashing, but you get the longevity that you want. To summarize the flashings that we just went through and their performance attributes here, you can see flashing types, the base material. That's basically what the flashing is made up of mostly. That tells you a lot about the warranty. Remember, we're going long term here. It's not a maintenance. It's buried in the wall. We want it to last and perform for the entire life of the building. These characteristics here are other things to keep in mind. Fire resistance, having a lot of recycled content, UV. I mean, you get it all with the flexible stainless. We want you to pick the best flashing for your building. So there's lots of different options here. For the sake of time, we're not going to talk about accessories other than I will say that they're important. They can be a really weak link. Don't overlook them. It could be something as simple as making sure your weeps are sitting directly on top of your flashing, or taking a look at these preformed drip edge inside and outside corners. They're becoming very popular now, and it just really takes that guesswork with the contractors lining up corners. You've probably walked by a building with a scary drip edge before. It's just trying to eliminate the opportunity for that to happen. We're all about reducing limitations, reducing components. It's no secret if you have a flashing that has active drainage and you don't need netting, well, that's one less material and labor cost. If you don't need primer, same thing. If you can get rid of a drip edge at the base of the wall, same thing. And these tables I can send you to review if anyone would like copies of them. I'm going to wrap up here just for some food for thought, switch gears from the through-wall flashing application to the transition application. By the way, if your firm is interested, the Air Barrier Association has several presentations on transitions. Roof-to-wall connections. They just did one for CSI called Mission Impossible Air Barrier Connections. So really good information. They do virtual presentations like this. You can contact them, or I'd be happy to connect you. The building enclosure is the result of a lot of failures. 90% of them occur in only 1% of the enclosure. So we're doing a lot of stuff right, but the little stuff can be catastrophic. Where are these? Penetrations, roof-to-wall transitions, dissimilar material transitions. Here's the evolution of peel and stick. Where we've come, where we're going, it's a product that's 2 mils of stainless steel, 10 mils of butyl adhesive. The thickness of this doesn't change based on where you're going to use it. So I'm going to show you a couple applications that are they're different than through-wall flashing. It's still the same darn product. So we got the butyl, no primer required, really strong, over 2,500 PSI versus the 120 on rubberized asphalt. Class A fire resistant when rubberized asphalt burns, UV resistant when rubberized asphalt is like 100 days, compatibility with everything, and AMA 71120. If you have not heard of AMA 71120, it's just a battery of tests that they use for a benchmark in the fenestration industry. So now the product is good to be used windows, doors, and fenestration industry products. You may have seen this before. We've done a little promoting recently with this. We've spent, the last 45 minutes talking about through-wall flashing, but there's so many other areas on the building where this could solve an issue. Roof-to-wall up here, below-grade transitions between two different types of air barriers. So for anyone who wants the self-adhered flashing, this lasts the life of the building. I think we covered this one enough. How about a transition membrane to below-grade waterproofing? So what they've done here is they've wrapped this slab edge with the self-adhering stainless steel and transitioned it on top of the below-grade so that they didn't have to bring the below-grade up and void the warranty. They didn't have to worry about this holding up to these conditions because the stainless is pretty durable. And then whatever pods they go to sit on top of here, whether it's a curtain wall system, it's great to adhere to. So that stainless steel surface can now accept lots of different primers and sealants and materials and be compatible with it. As a window and door transition, you can now wrap your openings with it. If you're going to fit a curtain wall on top of it, typically they're using those silicone sheets around it to tie in to your wall. Well, you have to use silicone a lot of times. Silicone doesn't stick to much but more silicone. So if this were a polyethylene facer, it wouldn't stick. But as a stainless steel, there's no issue with the silicone sealant adhering to it. Sill pans. If you have a project where a client understands the importance of protecting our underneath of our windows and doors, really cheap insurance here. I mean, you're talking $15 for a sill pan when these are, where we put the holes in the wall is where it leaks. So it's thin, it doesn't build up in the corners, you can fold it, you can cut it, and right on site, it's going to fit in every opening. You don't have to worry about a preformed metal or plastic pan that's not going to fit. Transition between two different air barriers. So this is a real detail from a project where they had an each system, and the blue line was the air barrier manufacturer that was recommended behind the east. And then down here on the bottom, they had a brick veneer with a different air barrier manufacturer. So how would they connect that blue and green line? They might be compatible. They might not. They might just not get a letter written by the manufacturers. We know this line has to be continuous, so they use the self-adhering stainless steel, that red line, to make that continuous. I do want to mention that the self-adhering stainless steel is a certified air barrier. It's a certified air barrier as a product. It's not part of a system. Doesn't need to be if it's just a transition here. per ASTM E2178, so there's no hesitation using it as part of your air barrier system to make it continuous. Not to mention, has a lifelong performance. Roof to wall, this is just showing, this is a, where they're bringing a high wall here together onto a low roof. If you want to bring an air barrier roofing membrane on here, your wall system coming down, your air barrier here on top, it's just showing that you can now bring those two materials together and not have to worry about the compatibility. Parapet transitions could be a solution here for a variety of reasons. The Air Barrier Association has actually adopted this product into their standard set of details. All they're doing is calling out for the self-adhering stainless steel to be a isolation and material that maintains the continuity on that control layer there. So lots of ways that you could do it. It's one of the, a couple things that they were considering. Is it compatible? Yes. The longevity of the material, if you're going to recommend something to bring two products together, you want to make sure that it's, going to last long. And because of the compatibility, it really helps ease the sequencing of trades. Like I said early on about testing your peel and sticks in both directions, you never know who's going to now be installing on top of the other one when originally we thought it was going to be the other way. So the transition membrane just makes sequencing of the trades a lot easier. The last point here is that you can use it to dry in the top of the wall during construction. There was a position paper put out by the ABAA. This is a very recent, July 2021. July sounds recent. I can't believe it's almost Thanksgiving. But what you can do is you use it to tie in or to cover up the top of your wall once your air barrier is installed to prevent any bulk water from getting behind your air barrier and causing it to blister or become unattached. One of the benefits of using this versus, another, let's say just another peel and stick, is that this doesn't have the UV sensitivity. You wouldn't have to come back up and remove it. You could leave it forever. And also, it allows the compatibility issue to be pretty ironed out when you're not running into compatibility issues. If there are gaps, little covering the voids of the top of the CMU, it can do that. It can span those spaces, no problem. So that's the end of the AIA presentation. Bear with me here. I got a couple last-minute announcements that I want to say before we close out the AIA portion. It's supposed to be like 50 minutes for AIA to give you credit. But I just want to wrap up by saying your flashing needs to function for the life of the wall. It's incredibly expensive to fix. If you're using masonry, we recommend the flexible metal flashing. Make sure you have the appropriate accessories. When you're writing your specs, choose the type of flashing system you want going in. If you list options, the cheapest one is going to get picked. I can assure you, I would be pretty confident in saying this, every contractor, masonry contractor in the Mid-Atlantic is familiar with these products and have installed them. They're not new, they've been around, they are affordable. I'm going to put my contact information back up here. Thank you all for your time today. Let me know if you want us to take a look at specs. We're not going to change them. We'll just give you some feedback. We also have another product out that's a storefront flashing clip and receiver. So here's my plug for that. If you're working on something that has become a headache because they don't know how to attach the storefront flashing, I got a solution for you. And it was actually designed by a consultant in the area who works with general contractors. And they were like, on every building, this is becoming an issue. And how we've been doing it is just shoving it under the storefront. We're interrupting the perimeter seal. It's not easily replaced if there's damage. It's a thermal break issue, performance, sequencing, a whole laundry list of items. There is now a receiver and a clip. I don't want to take too much of your time on it because I want it to be relevant. But if you have this detail that you're working on, come to me. Let's talk about it. I really think this could be a big headache and time saver for you. Not to mention the performance. I'll wrap up by just showing this. That's the clip. Your sub-sill would be part of your storefront assembly. There's no flashing attached, nothing hanging out. Nothing that's going to get damaged yet. Lastly, they come back and clip the flashing in place. So now, rather than attaching your flashing by shoving it under the window and giving it a horizontal attachment here, we're now attaching it on the vertical face of the wall. And we're allowing this perimeter seal between our storefront and the air barrier to actually come together rather than interrupting it with flashing. So pretty cool. We think it's really neat. More to come on this. It's been featured in a couple blogs recently by Tremco and some other folks. And if you're interested, just come to me. I would love to talk to you more about that one. Send you samples, that sort of thing. So with that being said, again, here's my contact information. Thanks everyone for your time this afternoon. Hopefully you're all staying safe. I'd love to be back, visit your office sometime. Samples, spec reviews, mock-ups, you know where to find me. And Christine, thanks for gathering everyone's information. I appreciate it.
Yes, of course. Thanks for presenting today. I will
get
those to you, the list of names and the AIA numbers.
Perfect.
Bye.
All right. Thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you.